There's a specific kind of quiet that hits somewhere around 30. You're not in crisis, nothing dramatic happened. You just look at the list one day. The house, the marriage, the kids, the career that was supposed to be settled by now, and you count how many you've actually got. And the number is smaller than you expected. And the story everybody tells you about that moment is that some people fell behind, that they made the wrong calls or waited too long or believed the wrong things. I believed that story about myself for years. Then I went and looked at the numbers. And the numbers say something much stranger. Nobody fell behind. The script was withdrawn, and nobody sent the memo. Let me tell you who's talking so you know what this is. I'm the guy who spent most of his 30s quietly measuring his life against a checklist he never actually chose. Nobody handed it to me. I absorbed it, the way you absorb weather. Finish school, get the job, move out, get married, buy the house, have the kids, roughly in that order, roughly by 30. And every year that I didn't tick one off, I filed it under personal failure. This video is what happened when I stopped filing and started checking. Now, two things before we go further because they matter. First, everything I'm going to tell you is public data. Census Bureau, National Association of Realtors, published clinical research. I'll tell you where each number comes from, and I'll tell you where the numbers are disputed, because on one of them, they genuinely are, and pretending otherwise would make this video worthless to you. Second, and this is the important one, there's a popular version of this topic that goes, women hit 30 and discover the plan didn't work, while men had already figured it out. I'm not doing that version. Not because it's impolite, because it's false. And I can show you the two numbers that kill it. The break wasn't between men and women. It was between generations. And it caught everybody. So let's actually measure the thing. The U.S. Census Bureau published a working paper in August of 2025, built on 2 decades of American community survey data. They took the 4 traditional markers of adulthood, moving out of your parents' home, working, getting married, having children, and they asked a simple question. What share of 25 to 34-year-olds has all 4? In 1975, it was about half. Half of young adults had the complete set. 50 years later, it's less than a quarter. Sit with that for a second because it's the whole video in one statistic. The package that was normal enough to be assumed, normal enough that not having it felt like failure, is now a minority experience. It didn't shrink a little, it fell by more than half. And here's the part that reframes your own 30s. The most common arrangement among young adults today isn't the full set, and it isn't nothing. It's exactly one piece: financial independence. 28% live away from their parents and work, with no spouse and no children. That's not a broken version of the script. That's the new, most common life. And if that's roughly where you are, you're not behind the pack. You are the pack. Now let's take the milestone that moved the furthest, because it's the one that does the most psychological damage. Housing. The National Association of Realtors runs an annual survey of people who actually bought homes. In their 2025 report, the median age of a first-time buyer hit 40. 40. That's the oldest on record. And the trajectory is steep. It was 31 in 2014, 36 in 2022, 38 last year, 40 now. In the same report, the share of buyers who were first-timers fell to 21%, also a record low. Now, here's where I keep my promise about disputed numbers. The Mortgage Bankers Association looked at that figure and pushed back hard. They use the National Mortgage Database, which is built on actual mortgage records rather than survey responses, and it tells a milder story. A median first-time buyer age of about 32, not 40. So which is it? Honestly, the level is contested. Survey data and mortgage records are measuring slightly different populations in slightly different ways, and reasonable people are arguing about it right now. But notice what nobody is arguing about. Every single source agrees on the direction. Whether the first-time buyer is 32 or 40, they are years older than they used to be, and the trend line points the same way in every data set. The disagreement is about how bad, not about whether. I'm telling you this because I want you to be able to repeat these numbers to someone without getting embarrassed. That's the difference between information and ammunition. And one more, so the picture is complete. The median age at first marriage in the United States is now just past 30 for men and just under 29 for women. Both of those are historic highs. Which brings us to the thing I promised, the two numbers that kill the gender version of this story. Here's the claim I want to test. The claim is that this is a women's reckoning, that they followed a plan, hit 30, and discovered it didn't deliver, while men had quietly worked it out ahead of time. It's a satisfying story if you're a man. It's also wrong. Take the share of people married by age 30 and compare the generation born in the early 1940s with the generation born in the early 90s. For women, 79.6%, down to 30.3%, a drop of about 49 points. For men, 65.3%, down to 20.3%, a drop of about 45 points. Look at those two collapses side by side. They're the same event. Within a few percentage points, men and women experienced an identical break. There is no asymmetry to be smug about. And then look at where the two lines land today, because this is the part that ends the argument. Among people born in the early 90s, about 30% of women were married by 30, and about 20% of men. Today, fewer men reach 30 married than women do. So the idea that men saw this coming and adjusted? The data says the opposite. Men are marrying later than women, in smaller proportions, and the median age at first marriage for men is higher, not lower. Nobody got ahead of this. We were all standing on the same floor when it gave way. And I want to be careful here because it would be easy to hear this as a scoreboard, as if I'm saying men have it worse. I'm not. I'm saying the scoreboard is the mistake. The moment you turn a generational economic break into a story about which sex handled it better, you've stopped describing reality and started recruiting. And you've also guaranteed you'll never figure out what actually happened. So let's figure out what actually happened. The script didn't break because people got lazy or selfish or afraid of commitment. It broke for a much less satisfying reason. It was a description that everyone mistook for a plan. Here's what I mean. In 1975, that sequence, job, house, marriage, kids, by around 30, wasn't advice. It was just a summary of what most people were doing. And they were doing it because the economics of 1975 made it the path of least resistance. A single income could carry a mortgage. Housing cost a fraction of what it costs now relative to what people earn. A job without a degree could support a family. The sequence wasn't wisdom. It was a description of the cheapest available route through a particular economy. Then the economy changed underneath it, and a description of what used to be easy quietly became a prescription for what you're supposed to achieve. Nobody updated it. Nobody announced the change. Your parents kept repeating the sequence because it was true when they lived it, and it never occurred to them that they were describing a route that had since been closed. That's the whole mechanism. A map of a road that no longer exists, handed down with total confidence. And here's why that's so much worse than it sounds. If someone hands you a bad plan and says, "This is one option," you evaluate it. If someone hands you the same plan and everyone around you treats it as the normal default, You don't evaluate it at all. You just measure yourself against it. And when you fall short, the conclusion isn't, the plan is outdated. The conclusion is, something is wrong with me. That's the quiet damage. Not that people failed to buy houses at 28, that millions of people concluded they were personally defective for living in the economy they were actually born into. Now, I want to be precise about something, because this is where this kind of video usually turns into an excuse, and I'm not interested in giving you one. Saying the script is outdated is not the same as saying nothing is in your control. Those are completely different claims. The economy set the terrain. It did not make your individual decisions. Plenty of people navigate this terrain well, and plenty navigate it badly. And the difference between them is mostly whether they're making deliberate choices or drifting while feeling bad about a checklist. And that's the actual failure mode. Not being 30 without the house. It's using a dead script as your decision-making tool anyway. That's how you end up buying more house than your income can carry, because 35 felt late. That's how you end up marrying the person who's in front of you at the right time rather than the right person, because the calendar said now. And on this channel, we spend a lot of time on what that second one costs when it comes apart, which is far more than the wedding. I've watched men make that trade, rushing a permanent decision to catch up to a timetable that was retired before they were born. And the settlement math doesn't care why you married someone. It only cares that you did. So the script doesn't just make you feel bad. If you keep using it after it stopped describing reality, it makes you make expensive, irreversible decisions to satisfy a deadline that nobody's actually enforcing. Which brings me to the one real deadline in all of this. Because there is one, it's not social, and almost nobody explains it to men honestly. Everything I've said so far argues that the calendar is fake. I need to add the exception, because if I left it out, I'd be doing exactly what the old script did, telling you a comfortable story instead of an accurate one. Biology has a timetable. It's real. It's not a social construct. And here's the part that gets left out. It applies to men, too. You already know the version of this that gets aimed at women. It gets discussed constantly, sometimes cruelly, often as a weapon. So let me give you the half that men almost never hear, stated the way a doctor would state it. Male fertility declines with age. Sperm quality starts drifting downward around 35, and more noticeably after 40. Volume, motility, and the share of normally formed sperm all decline. DNA fragmentation in sperm rises roughly 3% per year, which means it approximately doubles between 30 and 45. One study found conception is about 30% less likely for men over 40 than for men under 30. And advanced paternal age is associated with longer time to conception, higher miscarriage risk, and elevated rates of certain conditions in children. Now, I'm not telling you that to panic you, and I'm definitely not telling you to go make a rushed decision. That would contradict everything I just spent 10 minutes explaining. I'm telling you because of the asymmetry in who gets informed. Women get told about this relentlessly, from every direction, often unkindly. Men mostly get told nothing at all, and then find out at 42 in a fertility clinic that their side of the equation was never neutral. That's the real asymmetry in this topic. Not that one sex figured out the life script early. It's that one sex has been handed the biological information, and the other has been left to discover it by accident. So here's how I'd hold both facts at once, because they don't actually conflict. The social calendar, married by 30, house by 32, done by 35, is arbitrary and outdated, and measuring yourself against it is doing you harm. The biological window is real. It's gradual rather than a cliff. It applies to both of you, and it belongs in your planning as a fact rather than a threat. One of those is a timetable somebody else wrote. The other is a constraint you actually have. The whole skill is telling them apart. So if you take 3 things from this, take these. First, stop measuring yourself against a script that was retired before you got here. Not as a comfort, as accuracy. If less than a quarter of young adults have the full set, and the single most common life is working and living independently without a spouse or kids, then behind is the wrong word. You're not behind the pack. You're standing in the middle of it, holding a map from 1975. Second, replace the calendar with your actual constraints. Not, should I be married by 30, but what do my numbers look like? What does my health look like? Is there a person actually worth building with? And what does the timing genuinely cost me either way? Those are answerable. Am I on schedule is not, because there is no schedule. Third, and this is the one that costs real money if you get it wrong, never let a deadline make a permanent decision for you. Not the house you buy because 38 felt embarrassing. Not the marriage you enter because everyone else did it first. The script cannot be sued. It will not be in the room during the settlement, and it does not pay half. I spent years thinking I'd missed something everyone else caught. I hadn't. The thing I'd actually missed was that the instructions had expired, and nobody had bothered to say so. So let me ask you, and be honest, which of the milestones you're chasing did you actually choose, and which one did you just inherit? Tell me below. I read them.